University of Toronto, and I pursued a CFA there, and then moved to New York and then to Dubai, where I worked in consulting for Roland Berger, for Accenture. And I got an opportunity to start this company, Zain Cash, which is a mobile wallet, back in 2015. I met people from Zain, and they told me, would you be interested in taking on this venture? And given my entrepreneurial background before my consulting days in e-commerce, I thought I would take that challenge and go back to my country and try to do something there. And that's where I started Zain Cash in 2016, which is basically a mobile wallet. And I'll give you more information after about Zain Cash and what it does. And then later, we also recently opened the first group workouts, first international franchise of fitness in Iraq, called F45. F is for function, and 45 minutes. It's an international brand. We opened 3-4 months ago, and we're looking to do more work. I'm part of, our companies are part of a larger umbrella where we have Zain, the largest telecom operator. We're partners with Careem, which is the ride-hailing app, and then internet services, Americana, which is food, and many others. So we're, as a group, we're trying to develop the country, and we're trying to bring the proper services and products back home. Now, what I'd love to talk about later on, and I'll leave the floor for Ahmed to guide us. But I'd love to talk about maybe, which will be very relevant, is to talk about how we started the business, what was the good in it, what's the bad. Unfortunately, given that I've seen what's around the world, going back home and seeing what's there, it's a very challenging environment, and it's a very challenging setup to build it. I'm more on the pessimist side, but we can go more in deep discussions there. And Ahmed, back to you.
Okay, thank you, Yazen, for your nice introduction. I would like to go to Moe Khafaji. Please tell us something about yourself.
Okay, well, thank you for having me today, and I'm glad to be here with Mr. Yazen as well. So my name is Moe Khafaji, Mohammed Al-Khafaji. I left Iraq when I was 15 years old. I spent more than half of my life in the US. I attended the end of my last years of my high school, did my bachelor's, master's, and entered a PhD program, all in computer science. My background and expertise are primarily in fintech, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and kind of some of the newer technologies, cutting-edge technologies. In the past 10 years, I've started 6 companies before I started the last one, which is Pure Platform. And most of my companies were in fintech or healthcare, all US based, and mostly kind of innovative technologies. I don't like to be part of a company that does another, service or offering that is that exists, but it's, a little bit better. I focus primarily more on innovative solutions and offering things that are kind of cutting edge or bleeding edge technologies based. Pure Platform is the latest of my adventures. I decided to found Pure Platform about 2 years ago, after I decided to engage with a few Iraqis, primarily here in the US as well as in Baghdad. I started doing some online training on some of the use of the latest technologies, primarily in programming, application development, backend development, enterprise applications in general. And since 2016, we've seen some success training Iraqis, young Iraqis just graduated out of colleges in Iraq, and did not have a stable job or a good, valuable job after they graduated. So what we ended up doing is reaching out to some of these newly graduate students in computer science primarily, and focus on training them. And we ended up being the first company in Iraq to export technologies out of Iraq. So our developers in Iraq, out of Baghdad primarily, ended up developing applications for US-based companies, primarily in Chicago. And then based on this, a couple of years ago, we started thinking about developing a fintech solution to solve what I call the biggest problem in fintech, which is what I refer to as the cash problem, which is basically how do you convince people, or how do you get economies to move part of their funds or non-digital forms of currencies into a digital form of payment. And there are many solutions like credit card solutions, mobile payments like Zain Cash, for example. But Pure Platform primarily focuses on enabling or empowering some of these solutions. So we're not a replacement, we're not a competitor to some of these payment solutions, but we do offer a world first with and trustless enterprise platform that allows people to interact with each other, with businesses with businesses, over a platform that does not have any transaction cost, and where your money can have a much higher purchasing power than cash itself. So we actually work perfectly with other forms of payments, such as mobile payments or credit card payments. And we launched in Iraq officially about back in June of last year. And we've seen tremendous success. We've accumulated over 1,100 businesses and 15,000 customers. And after launching our marketplace recently with our universal shopping cart, we've seen tremendous success out of Iraq in the past 2.5 months, where we accelerated our revenue as well as user adoption, or users joining our platform and using it by about 900% in the last 1.5 months. And I would like to talk a little bit more about it today when I get a chance, and answer any questions you may have about it.
Thank you, Mo, for your introduction to Pure Platform. I think it's a very nice initiative. Also, you talked about the trainings you gave to Iraqis in Iraq itself. I would like to give you guys a question, so Yazen and Mo, because since you both lived outside of Iraq and came back, what is the good and what is the bad? So in terms of business, in terms of private life, etc. So I would like to first ask a question to Yazen and then Mo.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of business, I mean, going back to Iraq, my situation was a bit different. Does not really reflect on most people who want to go back and start a business. As when I went back, I went in under the umbrella of Zain. So obviously they supported me a lot in setting up the business, etc. In terms of my accommodation, we always had everything that we need as an individual. I came in as an expat too. I was not. I came in a different way. But in terms of setting up a business, Zain, I started 2 businesses in Iraq. So one is Zain Cash, which is the mobile wallet, a licensed mobile wallet by the central bank, and it's similar to any bank. The only difference is that the ATMs are agents. We have 5,000 agents across Iraq where they do the cash in or cash out, as if you're going to any ATM, let's say in Amsterdam, and you're going to cash in or cash out money, and then through the wallet you can pay bills, transfer money, etc. And we're seeing our transaction grow tremendously over the past 4 years. We're reaching almost $1 billion, what's equivalent to $1 billion a year, which is bigger than any bank. And what in terms of starting the business, I mean, coming in from a Western background in terms of work, building the team, let's say starting from zero, building the team was challenging. Finding the right talent was very tough. So we had to find more focus on the youth, get younger individuals who are more tech savvy. And that's something that I also would touch on with Mo, is that yes, there's a lot of tech savvy individuals in Iraq that we found from across the country. So I found very talented programmers from Nasriya, from Mosul, and they were extremely talented to a point. There's one person that was found very major gaps in the system, and they came, and he was like they call it a white hacker, where he comes in and he says, I found this, and we hired him right away. And he was just a doctor that enjoyed programming from Nasriya, and we brought him into the company a few years back. And so there's a lot of talent. It's just finding them and spending the time on them was extremely challenging on one hand. Also, what was challenging also is the work, say, style of individuals, and that's more about the Middle East. It's just that when I came from Dubai or let's say North America, where I came from very working cities, and in Iraq, it was more of a different style to working. So adapting to that was difficult. Now, this is in terms of the Zaincast side. In terms of a smaller business like the gym, this is more relevant, I feel. What we found is setting up a small business in Iraq is extremely difficult. So number one, rent is extremely expensive. On top of rent, you have electricity, where you have to have a generator, etc., and that's also very expensive on the business. Number three, also internet is extremely expensive, and then on top of all this, the market is very price sensitive. So a lot of, let's say, in Iraq, usually people are really focused on the price, and that makes it very difficult to run businesses in Iraq. And also on top, there's not a proper legal system that protects the business. And I'll give you an example. Like in this time, in the Corona time, we had to close down the gym, and our landlord still requested us to pay the rent. And if you look at any other country, there was the government and the ministries that protected small businesses and had certain laws to protect us. And so overall, it has been opening small businesses in Iraq. Given the high risk of the country, it's not worthwhile for any investor. So he would look, if I'm going to go open a business in Iraq, what I expect with a higher risk is a higher reward. But in Iraq, it's a higher risk, but it's not that great of a reward. And it also applies for the wallet. Now, in terms of a personal life, what I saw, what I liked and what I didn't like, I expected something different. I expected more of a conservative and let's say very guarded societies because of what happened to Iraq. But when I went in, I saw a very vibrant and lively communities. And let's say an example is the gym, the studio that we opened. I've been to many of these same exact model across the world. And when we bring in Iraqis to work out together in a team environment, the energy and the bonding between individuals was on a different level in Iraq. So you'll see people bonding together very quickly. You see them always on high energy and positive energy. So that's something I actually really liked being there. It's just that the humanity and the kindness of people there is definitely unique for us, at least for Iraqis, people who are live there. So that's on the positive side. In terms of negative, people are still conservative, let's say, worried. So families are still, and they have the right to do so. It's still, the situation is very volatile. I mean, if you just look at the 7 months back, you have the protest, and then after the protest, you had the assassination, and then after the assassination, you had Corona, political instability, and militias, etc. It's a mess, and anyone would be worried to let, let's say, their daughters or their kids to go, let's say, even to a gym or to work out. So it's very challenging in terms of the country, but the beauty of it is more of the individuals. And yeah, or
thank you.
I hope that give a bit of a picture.
Yeah, It does. So your points were finding right talent. The working style is different. Government doesn't support SMEs, small, medium-sized businesses. However, life is more vibrant, dynamic, as you mentioned. High risk, but not per se a better reward or higher reward like other countries. Mo, do you agree with that? Do you have a different view on this on this story?
So Yazen had a lot of positive or optimistic view of the Iraqi ecosystem, but he also has some pessimist ideas about it, and I do concur. You know, some of there are many challenges, obviously. As a myself as an entrepreneur, as an investor, as someone that looks to innovate or start new businesses, Iraq has been tremendously challenging compared to other environments that I've been a part of. So definitely, this is something that I would definitely agree with. A lot of challenges exist in Iraq. You have slow internet, non-existing internet many times. You have obviously a population, a very young population. I think latest numbers that I read, about 50% of the population is under the age of 20 or something like that, or 47% under the age of 25. So you have a tremendously young population, very hungry, very thirsty for new technologies, for technology innovation, trying out new things. To be honest with you, when I look at young Iraqis, they remind me of myself. When I was 15 years old, I was in Iraq under a very tough situation back in the sanctions days. And I remember myself, I was incredibly ambitious. I wanted to do a lot of things. I had a lot of energy. I was very passionate. But the ecosystem was not assistive or helpful. And when I landed in the U.S. at a younger age, it felt like a bird leaving a cage. It was very, very. It was just mind eye-opening. It was a brand new adventure of a different type for me. And when I look at young Iraqis, I see myself, but a little bit less fortunate version of myself. Someone that has similar, if not more, passion, ambition, but they did not have a similar opportunity to do well in life like I have. And I kind of view it as a duty, so not just an entrepreneurial opportunity or an investment opportunity. I see it more of a kind of like a duty back to my colleagues and younger generations to provide mentorship, to help out. So I've been given lectures about the latest technologies at different universities across Baghdad. I haven't done much outside of Baghdad just because of my limited travel to Iraq. But I started traveling to Iraq back in 2017 after 20 years of being outside of Iraq. As an entrepreneurial, with entrepreneurial spirit, I tend to be a little bit more of a risk taker. I see all the problems in Iraq as tremendous opportunities. When I meet young Iraqis, I actually tell them, you're very lucky. You actually have a lot more opportunities than, for example, young Americans. Just to give you simple examples, young Americans have a tough choice between applying for a job, which you have plenty of in the US, versus starting your own business and having the opportunity cost of actually not making money and losing potentially. Young Americans have to leave their home at the age of 18, 17 and start being responsible for their own payments and so on. Young Americans have to pay for colleges, very expensive payments. Actually, most Americans, 20 years later, they're still paying the college debt. I see this as a tremendous opportunity for young Iraqis. Most unemployed Iraqis are talented. They sit at home. They live with their parents. They don't have as much expenses. I see tremendous opportunity in this to start your own business. I actually go around and train Iraqis to start their own businesses. And when I train Iraqis, I don't put any conditions about them having to join my business or working for me. after they graduate, they can actually go and work for a competitor if they wanted to. So I view this more of a responsibility for them. But I tend to have more of an optimistic view. I see tremendous opportunity in Iraq. I've traveled tremendously in the region, and I see a lot of opportunities, primarily in fintech. I see a lot of things that can be done. A lot of improvements can be brought upon to this very vibrant region. I see Iraq where UAE was back in 2005 or so. Obviously, you still have a lot of instability, a lot of political issues and so on. But I see this as tremendous opportunity as Iraq has to recover from this. There is no choice. And to recover from this, it has to accelerate efforts in primarily in investing in the private sector and companies like ourselves, like Zain and others. And that's the only way forward. You can't depend on the public sector. So private sector, I anticipate tremendous growth in the next couple of years, just like what happened in Dubai and UAE, where their GDP primarily doubled, I think, in 2 years or so. So I see Iraqi GDP or economy on such a trajectory. Although now you're looking on the way down with oil prices and political instability, but I see us heading in the right direction in the next year or so. And I see this as a good opportunity for us who live outside of Iraq to come back and invest and kind of lead the wave or create the wave of turning around, as well as in young Iraqis receiving people like us, working with people like us to do this as well. So I tend to be a lot more optimistic. I've invested a lot of money. I'm not talking about myself individually only, but also collectively bringing a lot of talent, bringing a lot of people, advisors, brought a lot of attention. We have advisors working with us from big e-commerce businesses in the US. One of our advisors, economics professor, nominee, Nobel Prize nominee. So we have a lot of talent being redirected now to Iraq, paying attention to Iraq to try to bring a lot of innovation. So I tend to be a lot more optimistic about the next upcoming few months and more.
Thank you, Mo. I liked your point about creating the wave. Yazen, do you think the same about that, about creating the wave, bringing diaspora, bringing expertise from abroad to Iraq and helping local entrepreneurs? Is your view about it the same?
I'm sorry, bringing expats from abroad?
Yeah, I mean, like expats helping local businesses. What's your view on that?
I mean, yes, that's what we're currently doing. We're trying to get expats to develop local talent. And that was basically me. I mean, I came in and I feel I did play a part in developing, let's say, the youth and trying to give as much as I know and what I learned from my experience back to them. And many are actually learning very well and they're developing. Now the team, at least my team, they're really growing quickly, given the demand of the business. We're under extreme pressure because of how fast are we growing, and we're trying the team to grow with it as well very quickly. So someone, let's say a young individual coming to our company, within a year or 2 years, he needs to be able to manage someone with him and then slowly grow. And within another, let's say 6 months, he needs to manage 2 people, etc. So we're growing with that in that pace. And getting expats, yeah, we many companies are doing it, getting to help. But I also feel that there's a lot of talent in Iraq, and just said you have to give it time to build them and develop certain important skills. Unfortunately, many companies there, they don't teach the right skill sets, or even universities, etc. They leave school knowing they're great at math, but then when they come at applying this at work, the basic things of project management or communication, writing, Excel, PowerPoint, etc., they're very weak, and you have to teach them things from the start. Luckily, there's a lot of content online and YouTube, etc. So it's much easier now to push someone to ask him to learn and come back. So that's all great. I'm not as optimistic as Mo in the next 3-4 months with what's happening with the oil prices and the corona, etc. But overall, Iraq, yes, obviously has a potential as a country. We're a 40 million population, as you said, very young population. Smartphones are, let's say, 60%. Everybody has a mobile phone, everyone. From the displaced individuals, the refugees, to the youth. It's a very big gaming country. This is something, by the way, stands out in Iraq. It's the biggest gaming country, I think, in the world. Everybody is on game. So, for example, PUBG, I think every person in Iraq plays PUBG, the game. And they love tech. So Kareem, for example, flew as soon as they opened their service in Iraq. They just did super well because it was such a needed service, and everybody had a mobile phone. And then as soon as they opened, I think they have now 20,000 drivers, and I don't know how many rides they do, but they do. It's one of the biggest countries they have. But at the same time, if you speak with Kareem, they'll say, you know what? They go back to the risk and reward formula. They're like, okay, in Iraq, one day there's no internet. Second day, there's these. That now the corona happened, etc. There's so much risk, and then it's very volatile in terms of the political, let's say, system. So they're like, okay, so it is a great country. There is the population, there is the oil, there is everything, but then it's still risky. If it's not violence, then there's protest. If this, then so. That's how businesses, like they would take a second or a third or fourth thought before even coming in. So if you look at what's the international investments in Iraq, it's extremely low if you exclude oil. So put oil on the side. Is there any international businesses in Iraq? There's none, zero. I mean, close to zero. And that's the problem. And then if you ask me what is the solution, definitely the government has a huge role in this. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot missing in Iraq. There's a lot of services that needs to be applied. But if you ask me, would you bring it to Iraq? After I opened my small business as a gym, which is a very small sample of and I'm like, no, I would not even open a second branch because it's so challenging. It makes no sense.
And I go to the last question, and then we go to the Q&A session. Last question is for Mo. Do you have any advice for diaspora communities, Iraqi diaspora communities all over the world? Do you have something to share with us that we can keep in mind, maybe also for future generations?
Sure. I speak to a lot of Iraqis outside of Iraq, and I always tell people when it comes to entrepreneurship, challenges are meant to be there for you to overcome. I mean, this is just the way it works. From my perspective, just to give you an example about Pure Platform, right? It's a new technology. It's we have 3 patents. It's unique. It's the first platform in the world that does what it does. It's the most rewarding program in fintech when it comes to mobile payments. We're not a mobile payment. We're just a rewarding program that is built on top of a mobile payment system. And when it comes to this, when we launched in Baghdad last June, we launched in smaller areas like east part of Baghdad, where the population tends to be of lesser income, just to see how people accept or interact with technologies. And we were very impressed with how people interacted with it, especially on the younger population. And we saw a lot of challenges. The app took too long to download. Well, what we did is we overcame this and built thin applications. And the application was, I think at some point it was 1/5 the size of Facebook app. It was much larger, much easier to download and much faster. When people were struggling with 3G on the go, we built the world first offline settlement system for consumers. So consumer just basically carry the device, open the application, shake the device, scan. We call it open, shake, and scan. 3 seconds without 3G. And this completes the transaction on the customer side without internet. When the regulations and the rules in Iraq became tough, obviously with the CBI rules around, currency and the form of currency and so on, we build a reward points away from currencies. So what we call is our point system, what we call a Kido, comes from Gilgamesh, Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero Enkidu. So it's all Iraqi based, brought with Iraqi history. The Kido system is purely a point system where the Kido is not exchangeable for cash. It's not fungible with cash, thus it's not currency, thus it does not need to be licensable. So from our perspective, challenges are going to be there. And I think there is a big misconception or perception about in the US it's much easier to start a company. It's incredibly hard to start a company in the US. It's actually, I consider starting a company in the US much harder than it is in Iraq. And the reason is, every time you start an idea, there are immediately 10,000 competitors in the field, right? There are people with various amounts of money that will come at you, and you have to go much faster, you have to go much more innovative. And in Iraq, there's less competition. There's less, not a lot of highly technical companies. And that provides for tremendous opportunity for young Iraqis and even expats and Iraqis outside to innovate and start innovative businesses in Iraq. I don't work primarily in the private sector. I think a good entrepreneur does not depend on the government to help them, to lift them. When Uber started in the US, almost every state in the United States had in its law, local constitution, as illegal for a non-permitted, non-licensed person to drive or give a ride to someone else. And yet, with the power of the people, getting around the law in a legal way, they were able to find ways to actually succeed. So the laws are going to be difficult in every country. Yes, I do agree with Yazen. The Iraqi law system is as if it was primarily established to make it so difficult for for smaller companies to start. And that's why when you go across the country and meet startup companies, I think at groups like the station and others, you find that most startups, if not all of them, are not successful. They're still underperforming, they're still losing money, and which is not very usual. You still have you should expect a small percentage to succeed. So the environment is very tough, but I think just like we did when we came as pure platform in Iraq, you find your challenges and you overcome them with innovation, and you find ways to get around them. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. You just have to overcome challenges. So I say to people outside of Iraq, don't let those challenges stop you. There's tremendous opportunity, and I'm a living example of this, as well as others that are involved in pure platform with me.
Thank you, Mo. So overcome challenges through innovation. I like that quote. So let's go to the Q&A session. We have some questions that will take some time. So the first question is, what technology do you foresee rising or booming or Iraq needs at the moment? Yazen, what is your view on that?
The question is, what kind of technology you see growing in Iraq?
Yeah, needs at the moment.
Yeah. So Iraq obviously lacks a lot of, let's say, technology is what's driving the world now. And even if you look at, let's say, the stock market, whatever is driving the stock market upwards is the technology firms, whether it's the Amazon, the Google, the Facebook, etc. And in Iraq, obviously, there's a lot of gaps still that has not been filled. Kareem just launched, I'd say last year or half ago, and many are trying to actually compete with them. But there's many things that's lacking. One thing is for us is the mobile wallet that we started, but we have a very small portion of the whole market. So the banked population in Iraq is maybe 10-20%, and there's still 80% of the population that's still dealing with cash. There's many technologies that need to look at what's missing, where are the challenges, and what's successful in other countries and apply it. So e-commerce is growing very fast now in Iraq, and there's still, it's gonna keep on growing. The ride-hailing companies are obviously growing. Digital banks like us, we're gonna be growing, and other fintech. So even online now with the Corona and the COVID, there's a new generation of businesses that are gonna start. Online home workouts, for example, that's something that is growing. And anything gaming, it will continue to grow in Iraq. Is things for kids. So kids also are also there's a lot to do for kids too with technology, whether it's education, etc. There's so many things that are already very successful across the world, and they're growing very fast. And Iraq is in need for it. And you don't have to be in Iraq to build this, but maybe make it cater to Iraq, whether it's the language, whether it's the speaking to the culture itself, and then and go ahead with it. So I believe technology will be the base, but technology will be driving the different services that needs to be provided to Iraq.
Excellent.
Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Moe, I also want to ask this same question to you. So do you have any insight on technology that is going to boom in Iraq, or that Iraq is currently needing? Also like something like cashless alternatives or anything like that?
So I do agree with Yazen. There's a lot of there are a lot of gaps in technology in Iraq, obviously. Yeah, I mean, starting from the most basic, which is the internet infrastructure, and then, you know, going forward with other things as well. Some of the major gaps that I find in Iraq with enterprise applications or businesses, whether small, medium, or large, is beyond the internet infrastructure, is the lack of data centers or good usable data centers. Obviously, the Iraqi law does not allow government-based businesses or federal businesses to use cloud-based services outside of Iraq. So you're kind of limited as a company in Iraq to do to innovate in this field. So I see data centers, internet connections as major obstacles in the face of many businesses to start. From a technology perspective, I expect the areas to grow the most would be mobile apps in general. I see, you know, crowdsourcing to be kind of like a big theme as more people kind of develop their own solutions based on the need of the society, you know, the Iraqi society, the economy of Iraq in general. I already started to see some innovation in some hospital systems. So I visited one hospital in Baghdad, and they started to use technologies in a technology-based system, basically in the hospital, patient records and so on. So I expect the private sector to drive a lot of these technology adoptions, primarily in enterprise applications, mobile app developments, mobile apps in general. I see a lot of customer-to-customer, consumer-to-consumer based applications like mobile app payments, like such as what we have today in Iraq. I see Iraq skipping the whole banking solution directly into mobile payments. I think just like what's happening in Africa, and now it's starting to be adopted in the US and Western parts of the world. Because of the ease of use, the simplicity. So I expect fintech to grow tremendously in Iraq and drive the technologies associated with it as well, such as, you know, home-based banking, customer-to-customer interaction, mobile payments. I also foresee a tremendous move towards data-driven businesses. Obviously, Iraq has tremendous treasure in human capital, one of the largest countries in the near Middle East. with the population quickly approaching 40 million. So data-driven, there are many opportunities for data-driven technologies, and by definition, this will lead to data analysis, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and otherwise. I also see tremendous opportunity, and this is purely based on need today, to develop cybersecurity-based solutions. I know there are tremendous challenges in the banking institution system in Iraq, with the infrastructure, as well as government-based infrastructure, where there's a lack of understanding and cybersecurity. I get amazed when I talk to quote-unquote cybersecurity experts in Iraq, and I find that their kind of definition or understanding of what cybersecurity is kind of like roams around or hovers around installing firewalls and blocking out some ports. And obviously cybersecurity is a whole science way beyond this. And but I mean, there's tremendous need for this. There are many hacking attempts on voting stations, on banking institutions, on government institutions, and I do believe in systems arising out of need. Look, for example, at blockchain and Bitcoin. Bitcoin came out of nothing, right, into existence primarily after the banking crash in the U.S. back in 2008. So it came as a response to overcoming some of the trust that you have to put in financial systems to use something that's completely trustless, such as Bitcoin, when it comes to trustless transactions. So yeah, I believe in technologies that will rise out of the need, and maybe there's going to be a rise of satellite internet as a way to overcome the slowness of internet in Iraq, and depending on the wired connection. So I see this also as probably something that will take over the theme in the next few months, as businesses have to do something about their slow internet infrastructure.
Thank you, Mo, for your insights. I'm going to Yazen for one question. It's about how did you come up with the idea to open up a gym? Was it based on research or something else?
I have a personal passion to exercise and sports, and I know how important it is in daily lives. And when I went to Iraq, I'm used to working out every day. And at the first 3 years, I was just working out from home. And then I visited a few gyms in Iraq, and I saw how backward it is. It's a big box, and it's all like weights, and I see how horrible people were training. They're still lifting weights, and this is like a very old mentality of working out. It's not like the new HIIT workouts, the functional training, etc. And obviously I visited many countries, and when I come and I see, well, this workout would give you a more efficient, better results in a very shorter period. I looked at different models to bring into Iraq. I thought about building my own thing first, but I saw it's a bit complicated. It's probably better to get international expertise. And F45 is a great brand. It's Mark Wahlberg, the actor's studio or gym, and I went in and I loved the team workout. So you go in with a team, 45 minutes. There's like 30 people in there, and then thanks for putting this up. And every day is a new workout. It's station based, so you go from one station to another. Great music, great atmosphere, a lot of high fives, a lot of like you're sweating with people, etc. So when I did that exercise in 45 minutes, it's not only I only leave with a great workout. I also leave with a better mindset, a better feeling, etc. And they said that's missing. I don't see that in Iraq. There's not even yoga studios in Iraq. There's not even a spinning studio. So that, for example, industry is very lacking in Iraq. And so we said, let's just try this. And we got the franchise and we opened the first one. And so far it's been very successful. If you look at our Instagram, it's called F45 Training Karada because it's in Karada. We just did an 8 weeks F45 challenge. And you see great results. In 8 weeks, we've seen people go from a different look. And so it's so nice to see Iraqis go in, commit to a workout, get that team workout atmosphere. And it's more of a community that we're building. And yeah, it's been very successful, but unfortunately, it's our bad luck. As soon as we opened, we got hit with the protests. So a lot of people got scared to come to the gym, roads were blocked. And then we tried to get females, but the thing is, this gym usually it's 70% female customer base. In Iraq, it's much less than this, and that's unfortunate because, sorry, that's my Siri. Girls don't really are scared to come out. Their parents, they're like, I mean, they don't let them go to the gym. There's a bit of a challenge in that mentality. But overall, we've been doing very well. Now we're doing, with this COVID, we're doing online workouts. So despite that, and then hopefully once this is all over, hopefully soon, we'll reopen again and come back to business.
Yazen, just a question in between from Ali Jawad. Don't you think you need to educate your clients first? Very few new in Iraq know about yoga, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I think people with the whole Instagram and social media, people are they educate themselves, and I'm sure they're always on their phones and they're learning slowly. I don't think yoga is it's something that I'm not interested in, so I don't know how to educate about yoga. I'm not sure if even females in Iraq would love yoga, but I think it's something that's is being practiced by millions and millions of mainly females. But in terms of HIIT workouts, what we educate people, we bring them in, we educate them of why we're doing this, that how efficient your workout will be. And then once they get once they come in and they get they love to see also expertise coming in from abroad, because the way we work out in the gym, there's screens it's a small studio. It's basically a big room, and then we change them into stations. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and you jump from one station to another. And there's like 6 screens in the front of you, big screens. And these screens the workouts are all streamed. They're all streamed from our HQ in Los Angeles. And the whole world will work out the same workout every day, and every day changes. So for people to come in and say, you know what, now I can work out the same workout that someone in New York is doing. I'm working on the same workout as someone in Beirut is doing, etc. So we're bringing the best workouts you can find in the world to Baghdad. And that's where people are saying, oh, you know what, number one, I'm training like top athletes, top actors like Mark Wahlberg. And then once they do a workout for even 2-3 weeks, because we give the first 2 weeks, 1 week for free, just for them to try it, and they see the community and they see the energy, etc. They're hooked, and then they don't stop. And that's something that happened to me, and I'm like, okay, I have to bring this to Baghdad and offer it to the people there.
I like the idea. If you guys don't follow it on Instagram, try to follow it. It's very, they have nice workouts. It's F45 Karada. Safa Jason, is there institutions in Iraq to support the startups? That's a question for Mo.
So I spoke to different organizations in Iraq, and I gave advisory level services. I think the startup ecosystem, there are two parts, right? This goes along the lines of everything we've been talking about today. There are 2 lines or 2 parts to starting businesses or an ecosystem in any country. One, you need the knowledge, and second, you need the experience. I think what Iraq lacks today is the experience. And a lot of what happens today in Iraq, including conferences, technology conferences, you see that people stir the same knowledge within the same pot. And that's a problem. You need to always inject new knowledge, based on experience. So I think one of the biggest challenges in Iraq that I've seen, and I've spoken to many startups in Iraq, is there are many new advanced concepts of how you lead your startup in a lean manner, how you create your financial and projections, how you identify your risks and how you manage them, basically, because every startup is about identifying the risks and managing them, basically. And there are a lot of aspects to this. There's a competitive advantages, competitive analysis of the market, projections, exit strategies, potential use of advisory, specifying, identifying strategic and tactical partnerships, potential partnerships. So there are a lot of aspects. Plus, you look at local resources, outside resources, how you would recruit, where you would recruit, how you would interact, how you build a team environment. There are many aspects to starting a startup. It's not as easy as hey, let's start a company, and I've seen a lot of startup companies in Iraq, literally based on this. I'm not going to mention any names, but there are some startup companies that actually have big shares in the market, and I've had conversations with their founders, and they ask basic questions like, how do I know when I'm going to turn positive or profitable, and things like that. You expect a startup to get a good handle on it early on. So, and this is based on the immature ecosystem, which is okay. I mean, it doesn't say that Iraqis are not smart or they don't know how to start a company, but you still need a lot of experience. You need people who have done it to come back and contribute, to create processes, to create ecosystems that will help hatch as many of these businesses as possible in the proper way, in the right way. So I've worked with a few organizations. Of course, in the last few months, things have been slowed down, but we started working on creating programs to take entrepreneurs and trying to inject some of the experience into their into some of their own, combine it with their own to basically do better in starting their own company. So I think knowledge, understanding is there, but I think the general ecosystem lacks the experience. And this is very typical for a country that has been mostly closed, has been mostly vulnerable to security and war situations, and been busy with these things more than activating the private sector. But I see this slowly turning around, and I see a lot more people from outside interested in Iraq now. I know that it's now falling on the shoulders of people like us, Iraqi expats, to come and contribute, because I've spoken to a lot of investors from the Arab regions. They tend to be a lot more scared or fearful about starting businesses or investing in Iraq, and as well as Western countries as well. So, but I see this hopefully turning around and injecting more experience into ecosystem, and that's all it lacks. Iraq is full of ideas; it just needs experience, and that's the challenge with it right now, I think.
Thank you, Mo. I have another question from Hamad Kadami. He says, thanks for sharing your valuable insights on entrepreneurship in Iraq. When we're talking about innovative businesses, we most of the time speak about Baghdad. This is not strange since it's the capital. However, the question arises, is there no possibility outside Baghdad? Question for Yazen, I think. Are you there, Yazen?
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you. So it's a question about why is everything in Baghdad, basically.
Yeah, good question. It's a very good question. But obviously, as Mo mentioned, it depends on the infrastructure. So in Baghdad, obviously the internet is better. You have the most of the population is there, so you can hire more talent in Baghdad. You have most of the universities there, so you have the youth coming from there. For example, for us, would we open a location elsewhere? It doesn't seem possible. It's much tougher. So the basics are not there. I mean, even at Baghdad, I see it personally is better than Erbil, because you have more population, so you have a bigger pool of talent. The internet is maybe not as good, but still at least you have a decent internet to work with. And another electricity, etc. You can get everything in Baghdad, and that's the main reason. But it's like any other city. Why would, for example, in the UAE, Dubai is more suitable than any other let's say governorate or city in the UAE? And it's because mainly in Dubai you find the most talent. Yeah, maybe Mo has a different perspective on.
And Yazen, also Haider asks here, so his question is, would you do it again, or would you be reluctant to start something in Iraq? Because you mentioned about high risk and low reward.
Yeah, unfortunately it's been a bad year, and I would, as an investor, I would say, okay, well, I put X amount of money into this business, what's the return on my investment? And maybe it's obviously it's a very bad year. We all know this. So obviously it's a problem after another, and now it's the whole year and it's all full of challenges. So after a full year of challenges, you say, okay, well, this did not go how I expected. It went like downhill, and then you think this. Maybe next year it will be a different year, and then it will be a positive year. Then I'll say, okay, now I have a better appetite. But the meantime of what I'm seeing, it's, yeah, I would rather keep your let's say your cash, your investment, or whatever your savings are. It's better to put it into a safer investment where you don't have to put so much effort and so much say, and you're so nervous about it, and you think about it, and then at the end it's not giving you the same return, and you might lose it all, instead of putting your money into like a simple saving account where you're making 2% per year. Maybe that's better for you, or in real estate, etc. But again, this is the current situation. Things will change next year. In Iraq, things may change overnight. A different government may change the whole country. Again, if our government is reshuffled, then we have a better leadership. As any other country, if you look at the UAE, it all depended on a great government that knew what kind of policies to put in, that knew how to drive business, etc. So if we have that, things might change in Iraq. We're hoping for that day.
Thank you, Zain. We cannot answer all the questions because we're running out of time. But I'm going to one of the questions of Ali Jawad. He's asking about registering a project in Iraq or his company in Iraq. It will take ages. What's your opinion about that, Mo?
I'm sorry, to start a company? Is that what you said?
Yeah, I think registering a company in Iraq. Would you recommend that, or?
So Pure Platform, we do it a little bit differently. So Pure Platform is a 100% US-based company out of Chicago. I think given the circumstances and the challenges and the risks in Iraq, this is probably the best situation. But obviously this is an option that's not available to everyone. We do have a local company in Iraq that has exclusive right to distribute our services and license to distribute our services and offer our products. But it's incredibly hard to start a business in Iraq from a legal perspective. It takes a lot longer than you'd imagine. In the US, I can start the company in a couple of days. And it's a very basic form that I can fill out online, and it takes $150, and I can create a business in any state, basically, of my choosing. Not a lot of documentations, not a lot of information that I need to provide besides my personal information, and we need to be a part of the company. In Iraq, it's incredibly hard. You can't start a company easily. To start an Iraqi-based company, you have challenges. You can't even use American names or English names. It has to be specifically Arabic names, unless you start an agency of some sort, and it has to have a translation. I mean, the regulations and the rules created around establishing startup companies in Iraq, you'd only think probably someone spent a lot of time trying to figure out how I can, make it so much tougher for people outside to create a company inside Iraq. But it's incredibly hard. It's incredibly hard. Sorry, but unfortunately, you have to do it. So my general advice is obviously do it. A lot of businesses in Iraq, they avoid creating companies, and they end up having problems with taxes and the government and so on. But because they continue to be small or mid-size, and sometimes they take risks, and even they grow out of their medium size, but they're still not registered. But I definitely advise against this. You need to be 100% compliant with the legal ecosystem. But then again, I mean, it's very challenging. I haven't found a way around creating a company in Iraq. I worked with the World Bank, trying to work with the Iraqi government, trying to change some of the legality around establishing companies. And we were hoping to, our efforts came to a pause or a halt in the past few months. But the idea was trying to work with the Iraqi government, trying to kind of educate some of the people from the World Bank, educating some of the people in Iraq, in the government, about how vital for the economy, for the government to provide ways for people to start companies very quickly, and just apply and start a company and basically have all the legal accounting things cut out for you. No taxes the first year, second year. I mean, there should be a lot of help from the government, especially you think in a government like Iraq or a country like Iraq, where most people are employed by the government. In Iraq, I think there are close to 4 million or 5 million government employees, so almost 10% of the population. In the US, in a population approaching 400 million, there's only 800,000 government-based employees. Everything depends on the private sector. And you think Iraq would tremendously push people towards the private sector and enable it and empower it. And this will alleviate some of the pressure and the burden on the government. It'll make people happier, right? I mean, it's even better for the government to look better in front of the people without spending money. And I think because of the need, this will end up being the only solution coming out of the oil crisis and Corona crisis and the government crisis right now in Iraq.
Perfect. Thank you, Mo. We're going to our last question because we run out of time. It's from Sarah. So actually the business in Iraq can be good with, of course, knowledge and experience, and there's a possibility for a good future with a good government to, of course, to make it easier. Is that a yes or no from both Yazen and Mo?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question quickly?
Yes. So basically that question is, if you have knowledge and experience, would it be a good possibility for us to invest in Iraq, or when the government will be more focused on its citizens?
Yeah, I mean, what Iraqis living abroad can do if they're interested in getting into the market is try to find a business that doesn't have to make you present or establish a business. As Mo said, it's very difficult if you go that route. Establishing a business, it's going to be extremely difficult. So you need to find ways to enter the market while you're abroad, and that's something to, as Mo said, maybe mobile apps, content, etc. Now, changing the government or changing the policies, this is a lost case. I mean, don't even try. Nothing will change them unless if someone comes in from leadership and then change everything. But for us to even try to change the government, I mean, the government itself can't even change the government. So there's no way that could happen.
From my perspective, I agree with Yazen on one point that I try to avoid the government in everything we do as much as we can, because I think the opportunities in the private sector, and anytime you try to combine with the government sector, you could end up having a lot more problems than opportunities or enablements. So we try to avoid, and my advice to anyone that starts a business, try to avoid working with the Iraqi government, simply because of the situation. It's really tough. And I always try to think positively about people's intentions. So I'm not the kind that would sit here and say, people have bad intentions in the government or otherwise. I tend to believe that people try to make things happen, but they don't have the right experience or the right understanding to execute on things. That could be their fault for not bringing in experts. I had a conversation one time with a parliament member, and he reached out to me and he said, Mo, I saw you, I heard you speak about the economics of digital payments. And I really loved what you said. I want you to come and give us a lecture in our committee, economics committee in Congress, in Parliament. And I looked at him and I said, I'm a computer scientist. I'm not an economist, right? That's not my expertise. And, a government, a country like Iraq, with the weight of Iraq is a big country. Iraq is not a small town. It's not an island. With the weight of Iraq, you need to bring in some of the world's renowned, known experts in economics, experts in fintech, experts in various fields. And there is no shame in exchanging this knowledge with the local talent. There is absolutely no shame. I think a lot of people tend to believe, don't bring in a foreigner because they'll take our jobs, or we have smart people. Yeah, Iraq has a lot of smart people, but sometimes it takes more than smart people to make a tremendous change. And there is absolutely no shame. Even the US does it, right? They bring, in the US, we bring expertise from Japan, from South Korea. There's absolutely no shame in it. If you bring in experts from other countries, or even expats, right? Those should be first in line, because they're Iraqis, they speak Iraqi, they love Iraq, and they also have some of the experience that they've gained in the West. There's absolutely no shame in bringing some of these talents and have them train the local talent, and then transfer some of this knowledge. And over time, you're going to end up having more and more of this transfer to local Iraqis, and then it ends up developing. I think back in 2008, when I visited Dubai the first time, one of the biggest plans that they had to bring about the economy, it was starting to bloom around then, about 2007, 2008. And one of the things that they did, they brought people, expats, there are experts in certain areas, graduates of big universities, and they made every managerial position required to have someone that came from outside the country, but expat, right? So they're still UAE citizens, but that had 20 years of experience outside, or 15 years of experience outside, and they gave them a lot of rights, a lot of compensations, packages. Try to bring them back to the country, and a lot of advantages. And even I heard some stories where they gave them free place to stay, rent and so on, and gave them free taxes on their businesses for 10 years. And that brought about a lot of change for the economy, where the biggest beneficiary was not the expats, was actually the local people that benefit tremendously from it. So I think, yes, it's if you have the knowledge and the experience, you can start a good business in Iraq. I think you're going to see a lot of challenges. And I think people are starting to realize in Iraq, gradually over time, they're starting to come out of this shell of understanding that it's all about Iraq, you need local talent, and that's all you need. No, you need to mix it up before you can advance local talent. But I think the future is bright.
I like the remark, the future is bright. There was the last question. We're going to answer the questions also separately on email. And I will also put the recordings online. Thank you all for joining this. Thank you, Mo and Yazen, for the insights and your time also, because we took 1 hour of your time, plus extra 30 minutes. Thank you everyone for joining the session. If you need anything, please contact us on the page, on the Instagram page or Facebook page. The credentials are here. You see them in the slides. Have a nice day, and Ramadan Kareem to all of you. Thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Yazen. Thank you, Mo. Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Beautiful. Thank you.